Hi, and welcome to Straight Talk About God video. I'm Jack. This will be the second segment on the tribe of Dan. Dan's doings, number 2. The last segment, the first segment, really all we did was establish that Dan, with his cousins from Tyre, became the Phoenicians and went, well, virtually all over the whole world, establishing trade routes and trading outposts and so forth up all the rivers. And the main thing that we focused on last time was that when Dan goes to a place, he always changes the name to Dan, in some form of Dan. And remember that Dan in Hebrew is only DN. There's no vowels, right? There's no vowels, so it's DN. So depending on what language you're speaking, or what's attached to the DN, it could be DON, DIN, DAN, DUN, even DEN. Any of those dens. And gosh, we named, I don't know, 15 or 20 rivers just that you can find on Northwest Europe and above the Caucasus Mountains, all with Dans involved, like the Danube River and so forth. So we did that last time, but we need to follow more about what Dan actually did, because without Dan, we don't know what happened to Greece, Athens, Troy, Argos, all those city-states over there. So that's what we're going to focus on this time. See, Dan was prophesied, he's the 5th son of Jacob, that he'd leave a trail, be a serpent by the way. So anytime you see a line in the sand like that, you say, oh, a snake was there. You know it was a snake, okay? And the way that we know every place that Dan went, he changed the name. And we saw in Joshua 19 and Judges 18, where in the Bible, that very thing happened. Dan would go to a place. In one place, there was an encampment. They made a big encampment with a military group, and they changed the name of the place to Mahanadan, the camp of Dan, Mahanadan. Okay, and then they went up and they conquered a place called Laish, a city called Laish, and took over that area because it wasn't allotted to them. By Joshua, when they got into the Promised Land, he put out all the allotments to the different tribes. Dan didn't get that allotment way up north. He got one down by the Mediterranean Sea. Well, they went up there with 600, which is the number for war, 600 warriors, and took over that place and renamed the city of Laish Dan. Okay, so that's right in the Bible. So. Again, we went over all those things last time where Dan went and changed the names, like the Danube River. Just to clear up any points of confusion, when we talk about Dan, the tribe of Dan, we find that there are settlements everywhere. They went everywhere with the Phoenicians, established trading posts and so forth. And it would seem like that would be impossible. You see, in the wilderness, there were 62,700 of them in just the tribe of Dan as they went through the wilderness. 67,000. 62,000. Well, out of those 62,000, before they even left in the Exodus, there were many migrations, which we'll see in detail today, out of Egypt over into the North Mediterranean, pioneered by Dan. and founders of those places, Danites. Well, after the Exodus, when they were in the wilderness, there were still 62,000 of them. Okay, different groups, small groups of Danites went a lot of different places. Okay, as we'll find out. So don't think it was the whole tribe of Dan. That's kind of a common thing. So you say, well, the lost tribes are Northwest Europe. No, they're not. They are. Northwest Europe and the British Isles is the main section of the whole lost tribes, of the 10 tribes of Israel. Some of them went all the way east to Japan, Afghanistan, way east. Okay? Some of them went way west, farther than that. Okay? The Phoenicians were over in not the United States, but in northern North America by 1000 BC, which maybe we'll talk about in a second. Okay, so there were a lot of different groups of the tribe of Dan who went different places. And so they wind up all over the place, not just in one place. So when you go to the map of Europe and find where mostly the tribe of Ephraim is, you find that's England. But it isn't mentioned anywhere else, although there might have been small groups somewhere else. France is the tribe of Reuben, and Reuben isn't listed any other place as the main body. But the tribe of Dan, they're in Denmark, they're over in Poland, in Gdansk. They're all over the place, okay? And earlier on, they were in Ireland, okay? Okay, so, and they, as the traders, see, you don't get very much international culture when you live on the farm, okay? Okay? You don't even get much international culture when you live in the city. But if you were a traveler and every year you traveled around the globe and visited the capital cities of 4 or 5 countries every year, did that all the time as a business person, you'd gather all kinds of culture and knowledge. See, the Danites, because they were the Phoenicians and went all these places and rubbed shoulders with all these different cultures, they picked up all the good stuff out of there. They became the intelligentsia, the culturally advanced. So when they arrived in a new place, wow, they were thought of as magicians, practically. Wow, I mean, I even speculated that because of the Phoenicians and their knowledge about the migrations of the 10 tribes and even migrations that happened earlier than the 10 tribes, when they went around the Cape of Good Hope and over into the East Seas, I think they probably made contact with the Chinese that were over there. And the Chinese, Marco Polo went over there and found that they had gunpowder. Well, maybe the Phoenicians were there 400 or 500 years earlier than Marco Polo, maybe 1,000. And they got advanced technology from the Chinese. I don't think that's set in stone, but it's an open possibility. The point is that one of the big groups of Danites that migrated and took over places was in Ireland, and they were the Tuatha De Danann, and they are the origin or the foundation of all the magic and the leprechauns and all that of Ireland. Let's go on. Okay, they were the intelligentsia. They brought culture and education and so forth, and they acted as a vanguard for all the movements of the lost tribes, right? Because everywhere they went, the knowledge of their voyages, of the places and the rivers and the islands and all of that, filtered back through to the Israelites, okay? Even before the Exodus. The Danites were going around the world by 1600 BC. which was at least 150 years before the Israelites went into servitude with the Egyptians. So a lot of that knowledge got back to the Israelites, okay, because of the tribe of Dan. Remember I did say that as the Phoenicians, they went every place, including North America, and there's a lot of information about that. But I do want to bring your attention one place. It's called Los Lunas. Los Lunas. It's in New Mexico. You look it up on the internet, you'll find it, and it's a giant temple complex. Okay, there's a lot of other stuff there besides what I'm going to show you. But in this, as part of this complex, there's a big stone face, about 4 feet in square, stone face, and it's got writing all over it. Okay, and this is our old friend, right? Missing links discovered in the Assyrian tablets by E. Raymond Capt. Okay, Behiston Rock is in here. This is a wonderful little book for the whole Lost Tribes, plus a lot of extra stuff. Okay, well, here's the author, E. Raymond Capt, the author, standing next to that rock face. Look at that. See that? All that petrograph there. Okay. On the previous page, he's got a copy of the writing, the actual writing. Take a look at that. The actual writing. Does that look familiar at all? Huh? You know what it says? It's almost verbatim the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments? Well, that could have got 1000 BC is when this whole thing is dated. 1000 BC. The Israelites didn't get the 10 Commandments from God and Moses on Mount Sinai until 1453 and a couple of 3 months. It took them 3 months to get to Sinai. They got the law, and then they wandered around for 40 years, okay? But the Exodus happened in 1453 BC. This is dated at 1000 BC. That's 400 years after the Israelites got the 10 Commandments. Well, the Danites, 62,000 of them, were in the desert there. They knew these 10 Commandments, didn't they? Of course, that was the only writing they had, the law of God. Boo. And when they got free over into the Promised Land and joined up with some more of their cousins of the Phoenicians and went around, it says in one place that we'll get to, we did last time, there was a war and Dan didn't show up because it said Dan resided in ships. They were out in the ocean. They were doing their thing out there. Okay? They were over at Los Lunas, New Mexico, hammering out and chiseling out this rock face with the 10 Commandments, 1000 BC. Maybe we'll get to more of that in a different segment. I hope we do. Let's see, 10 Commandments, Phoenicians. Okay, today it's going to be mainly Dan in Greece. In Greece, wow. Dan in Greece, okay. After Joseph dies, who rules? We didn't that in heavy detail. Zara, Judah's firstborn Israelite son, Israelite because Onan and and Shelah were by a Canaanite mother. God's not going to let that Canaanite blood into the line, okay? So Tamar does this trick on Judah, gets him to go into her. She has twins. The firstborn of the twins is Zara. He's the one that sticks his arm out. And the midwife, knowing there are twins, her her main job, her whole life job, is to make sure that she designates who the firstborn is. Because primogeniture is in effect, and the firstborn gets all the good stuff. He gets the birthright. The arm comes out, Zara puts his arm out, she puts a red cord around that arm. And the arm goes back in. And then his brother Pharez is full-born. But he's the firstborn. Okay? And he's got the red cord. When he comes out, he gets to be the firstborn. He gets the birthright. When Joseph dies, then Jacob's direction that Judah will be the ruler of the family. Joseph isn't the ruler of the family. He's the ruler of all Egypt, and the family is there under his protection. He's not ruling the family. Okay? Jacob's ruling the family until he dies. And then some 54 years later, when Joseph dies, who takes over? Jacob said Judah. Judah's dead. Zara might even be dead. It's that long ago. But somebody from the line of Zara is going to take over Joseph's position. And the Israelites ruled, including Joseph, they ruled for 250 years. 250 years. And all the princes, let me see, got here. Populations grow and so forth, and if they spend 400 years in Egypt, then that means that if they went out at 1453, they went in at 1853. So by 1800, they had already been there for 50 years, okay? And I'm positive that some of the Danites were already sailing around with their cousins from Tyre before Jacob and the family went to Egypt. Okay, they had plenty of time to do that, make contact with them, and they were their cousins anyway. Phoenician, one meaning of Phoenician is in a different language is Pahanic. Pahanic. House of Pahanic. Enoch. House of Enoch. They were distant cousins up there in Tyre, and probably Sidon. That's why they were able to get together. And they got together, I'm sure, before the family went to Egypt. And so that was already established, right? And within 50 years, why wouldn't they do the same thing? More ships, boom, go out there. The Mediterranean's wide open to them. They can establish trade with Crete and all over the place, find out what's going on. So that's what happens. At least 1800 BC. The families are well formed by the time Joseph dies. That's 70 years after they get there. 70 years. Let's see. And again, we have to remember. See, it's something that I never heard growing up, until I started studying all of this. They were in Egypt, they were slaves. Joseph ruled Egypt, and then when Joseph died, it says in Exodus, the Pharaoh said, I don't know who this Joseph guy is, we're going to go back. Well, wait a minute. What about the 250 years that the Israelites ruled? Absolute rule of Egypt. We don't hear about that part, okay? It's only that last little part. They weren't slaves. They weren't slaves. They were in the best place in Egypt, and after the famine was over and things got back to normal, which was only 5 years after they got there, they had big crops. They grew into 3 million people. Well, it was, 400 years later, but 3 million people came out in the Exodus, and that doesn't include the first Exodus. Diodorus, which we'll find out, Diodorus says there were two exoduses, one by land, that's Moses, and one by sea. The one by sea happened when the Pharaoh came down from Upper Egypt, down there in the south, Upper Egypt, and took over again. Well, all the princes and nobility, the Pharaoh, for all intents and purposes, he conquered the Israelites and put them into servitude. And when a conquering army comes in, who gets out? The nobility, the king, the princes, all, they all left. But that that was after 250 years. During that 250 years, all kinds of migrations were going on. You know? Half the historians say that the Greeks came out of Egypt. We'll find out about that. Let's see here. This can you be 15? Second Mediterranean trade with Greek and founded the settlement. Okay, yeah, they founded the settlements of Argos and Troy, Athens, and again we'll take a look at Eram and Capt here. Now, I hope you won't be bored, but I'm gonna do a lot of reading. Okay, I don't have a lot of charts and things to show you, but I'm going to do a lot of reading out of a couple books here. So try to stay with it. This talks about migrations long before Moses led the children of Israel out of Egypt, 1453 BC. Where do we get 1453 BC? Okay, because a lot of scholars say the Exodus happened in 1250, around 1250 sometime. They have no concrete evidence to say that for sure, you know, to prove that. How do I and many others say that it's 1453 BC? We have solid proof by the pyramid. The pyramid. Now, if you go to my God in 10 Minutes videos, you'll see two short segments on the pyramid, and the inside of the pyramid contains all these inward passages. No other pyramid has upward passages. All of them go into a room, that's it. The pyramid, the Great Pyramid, has all kinds of passages upward. And there's a dating system built in to all the upward and downward passages and the level passages, built in, and you can't deny it. It never has changed. It's always been the same as it is today. And the way we find that passage, that dating system, is by one thing that's put in the pyramid besides just the rocks themselves, and that's called a scored line. A scored line is at the beginning of the downward passage, and it's just a line. They took a chisel and just made a line, both sides, line. Well, astronomers figured out that line points to Alcyone in the Pleiades, and the line of the lower passage that goes out at the doorway at a certain time of history points to Alcyone and Thuban, which was at that time the North Star. And only once in 26,000 years, for less than 1 year, does that alignment happen. Okay? Because there's 300 or 400 feet on that downward passage, and if you get way down at the bottom, it's like a telescope. It's only 4 feet square telescope, and you look way out there, and only one time in 26,000 years does this passage hit the North Star. All the North Stars keep going by. You know, every 2,000 years there's a new one. So they keep going by, but they don't hit the line that goes out the passage. Only one time. And when that happens, the scored line hits Alcyone. Now, what's the date when that alignment happens? 2141 BC. Well, they say, well, that's when the pyramid was built. I don't care whether you say that's when the pyramid was built or not. It's 2141 BC, and then you start measuring down the passageway, and every time you come to something new, an upward passageway, a corner, whatever, you can stop and measure how many inches from 2141 BC down to that point. And when the upward passage starts, at the very beginning, the line hits right here, boom, is 1453 BC. And when you go by the dating and find out what the dating says, what it indicates, okay, because the printing press is in there, the Protestant Reformation is in there, Jesus' birth and death is in there, all that, you find that it relates to the people of Israel. Okay? So this upward, they're going down, The Israelites are going down, and they hit a place to go up. Now they can follow God. At 1453 BC, the Exodus happens, and they're free to go do their own thing. That's pretty solid evidence for me. Okay, 1453 BC is when the Exodus happened. And it gives you a base for all the other dates. Okay? Okay. 1453, there had been continuous migrations of Semitic Hebrews to Greece and other parts of Asia Minor and Europe. There are numerous references by classical writers to the Egyptian origin of the Greeks. Hecataeus of Abder, that's the 6th century BC, quoted by Diodorus Siculus in 50 BC, tells us that the most distinguished of the expelled foreigners, the nobility, princes, the king, followed Danaus, D-A-N-A-U-S, Danaus and Cadmus into Greece. You look those up in the encyclopedia, you know. All this information is right there. It's right there, okay? But the greater number were led by Moses into Judea. Now I have to stop there and remind you that there's a big gap of time between the Exodus with Moses and when all of the nobility and the high classes escaped when Pharaoh took over. Because it was maybe 100 or 150 years before the Exodus, when that first Exodus happened. All the nobility didn't get in the ships and go away, and these other guys went out with Moses at the same time. They weren't even there. You'll notice, if you do some in-depth study, that David, the line of David produced the Messiah. David was of the line of Pharez. That was the firstborn, full-born. Not Zara, but Pharez. He was the other twin, okay? Well, the king is supposed to come out of Judah. Well, Pharez was out of the line of Judah, so David had the legal right to rule. He was out of the line of Judah, but he was out of the line of Pharez. Well, wait a minute. Pharez wasn't firstborn. He wasn't the firstborn. Zara was where's Zara? Evidently, Zara isn't mentioned. He's not there. He's not there. Because when the Pharaoh came down and conquered the Israelites, Zara, the nobility, they left. They were gone. Mostly by that time, they had established, well, you'll see, they had all kinds of places established. So there's a big gap of time between these two exoduses. Okay? Let's see. Oh, and if you really want some scholarly research, go to Cyrus Gordon. He's one of the big time researchers and writers on this Hebrew Egyptian origin. See? Most of the other writers don't understand that they were Israelites. Okay? They just say, oh yeah, those Greeks, they came out of Egypt. Where were they before they were in Egypt? They weren't Egyptians. Okay? Diodorus gives us another version of the same story. Quote, now the Egyptians say that also, after these events, a great number of colonies were spread from Egypt all over the inhabited world. They say also that those who set forth with Danaus, likewise from Egypt, settled what is practically the oldest city in Greece, Argos, the Argonauts, Jason and the Argonauts, and that the nation of the Colchi in Pontus, that's up there by the Dardanelles, when they go, the Dardanelles by Dan into the Black Sea, were founded as colonies by certain immigrants from their country. And this is by reason This is the reason why it is a long-established institution among these people to circumcise their male children. The custom having been brought over from Egypt, not Egypt, okay? Just to clarify the timeline, who was the first one that God ever told to be circumcised? And circumcision wasn't unique to the Hebrews, but we know that God came to Abraham, didn't he? He said, Abraham, circumcise you, Ishmael, and all your male people. That's where it started. Well, by the time they were in Egypt, okay, they were still practicing circumcision. Even if they'd gone away to paganism, they were still practicing circumcision. Okay? They got it from Abraham, right? It didn't just all of a sudden appear in Egypt and then it traveled over to Greece. Even the Athenians, they say, are colonists of Sais, S-A-I-S, in Egypt. The Athenians, well, where is that? That's the west central delta. That's where they were from, wasn't it? The Israelites were down there in the delta. Okay. According to Euripides and Strabo, quote, Danaus, having arrived in Argos, made a law. Now, he didn't found Argos. Okay, you know, he arrived there, and there were people there already, and he's going to take over, but he didn't found it. It was already founded. By who? Oh, by his earlier grandfathers and great-grandfathers and so forth. The Danites went out there, they found these places, and other migrations took place. The princes of Zara that were 9th and 10th in line to be king, who never would be king, and they knew it, you know, didn't they take their groups and go and found places other, you know? You look for Calco and Darda in the Bible, and you'll find that there were migrations. That's, I'm not real current with that stuff, so you'll have to look it up yourself. So, where is it here? Danaus, having arrived in Argos, made a law that those who had borne the name Pelasgiote throughout Greece should be called Danai, D-A-N-A-I. You find this in the history books, right? Danai. Danai, the Argive Danai. We talked about those last time. Compare this with the act of the people of Dan, Judges 18 that I mentioned earlier, changing the names to the places where they went. We further learn from Strabo that that this Argos soon spread its name to the Peloponnesus, and afterwards to all Greece. For he says, quote, Homer calls the whole of Greece Argos, for he calls all Argives, those Argives, okay? The Danai Argives, Argive, as he calls them Danai and Achaii. Is that the second one? Yeah, right. We'll get back to Raymond Capt after a bit. But here's another wonderful little book. It's called Dan, the Pioneer of Israel. Anyway, you can read that other part there, okay? Written in 1880 by Colonel Gawler, and there's one of Dan's coat of arms, serpent, okay? Great book about Dan. It's got all kinds of stuff in it. We'll probably use it for another segment. In history, the renowned Danai of Greece are foremost. Danaus it tells us, came from Egypt. So did Israel. And Jethro's daughters, speaking of Moses, told their father, an Egyptian delivered us. He was a priest of Midian, okay? An Egyptian. Moses wasn't an Egyptian. They call him an Egyptian. She did. Strabo, who lived between 40 BC and 20 AD, says, quote, the Egyptians were the ancestors of the present Jews. See, that's because Strabo doesn't know that they were Israelites, okay? They're the ancestors of the present Jews. End quote. Apion, an Egyptian priest in the 1st century BC, calls the Israelites renegade Egyptians. And thus it serves the purpose of identification well that Danaos of Grecian history should be represented as coming from Egypt. The Dani are mentioned by Homer, Pindar, Euripides, Strabo, and others. They came from Egypt, right? And mostly influenced. Now, this wasn't only the tribe of Dan that went there, okay? I mean, I'm not even sure that Danaos himself was a Danite. I think he was, but I don't remember any reference that says, yeah, he was from the tribe of Dan. But the tribe of Dan had extremely high, heavy influence on these migrations, okay? And even if there were other tribes involved in the migrations, and other tribes, groups of other tribes were settled in Argos, the head tribe was Dan, okay? Argos, this head of all Greece, the first city of the Danai, it stood with two others, Mycene, or Mycenae, and Tiryns, T-I-R-Y-N-S, Tiryns. The latter of which, standing as it does close to the city of the Danai, might derive its name from Tyre, T-Y-R-E, right? The Danites and the Tyrians from the city of Tyre, the Phoenicians. Well, the Phoenicians, they were all pretty much the same anyway, and some of the places they went got the name of Tyre instead of the name of Dan. You know, no problem. Okay. There is another instance of the kind. The Dniester, or Dniester, which we talked about last time, that's the river. It's a river in above the Caucasus Mountains and the steppes, okay? The Dniester, okay, is sometimes called the Tyras, T-Y-R-A-S. That's by Herodotus and Strabo, okay? And the people living there are called the Tyratae, okay? And it is reasonable to infer that from the intimate home relations of the people of Tyre with the Danites of Israel, the Phoenicians, the names of Tyre and Dan were used indiscriminately. Okay? The origin of the Greek Hercules, we mentioned this last time, Grecian Hercules, or rather Heracles, H-E-R-A-C-L-E-S, as it is in the Greek, seems to me to have been the daring adventures and exploits of the semi-traders and buccaneers of Tyre and Dan. The Phoenicians, right? Jason and the Argonauts and their golden fleece. The Argonauts from Argos, and right? Okay. Out of which they formed an ideal man suitable to that heroic age, and in apparent conformity with the earliest divine command to subdue and have dominion. In Hebrew, Rakel, R-A-K-A-L, means to trade. To trade. And the Heracleum means traders. Traders, Heracleum. Okay? Those who went forth from Argos and subdued other parts of Greece are spoken of as the Heraclidae. Heraclidae. Or descendants of Heracles. Heracles. For a while, apparently, tribe of Dan, remember that, got to that in a second. For a while, apparently, in the confusion caused by the Trojan War, they were driven northward out of the Peloponnesus, of which some years after they made reconquest, okay, which was called, quote, the return of the descendants of Hercules. That's in Muller's History of the Dorians. From these, the descendants of Heracles, from these are the Lacedaemonians. Okay, the Lacedaemonians, whose capital is Sparta. Thus, Agamemnon, who was chosen commander-in-chief of all the Greeks proceeding to the siege of Troy, was king of Argos and Mycenae. And his brother Menelaus, okay, was king of Sparta, capital of Lacedaemonian. And they were all out of these Danite Argives originally, okay? All those people of history. Okay? Oh, let's see, 13. Okay, let's see about the serpent, okay? Dan was the serpent. No, I got to tell you about Hercules, okay? Hercules. Gawler doesn't mention this any place that I know of, or that I remember, but isn't it interesting that Hercules, out of the tribe of Dan, okay, Danite influences all the way back, okay, Hercules is the strongest man in the world, right? Wow, yeah, put a shoulder on it, hold the earth up, big strong guy. Well, wouldn't the traditional stories, myths and legends and so forth that are passed down through all the generations, wouldn't Hercules have an earlier origin, okay? Origin than here? Maybe, who was the strongest man in the Bible? Samson, one of the judges of Israel before the kings, right? Samson, boy, pick up the gates of the city, kill 1,000 people and pull down the temple and all that stuff. He was a tribe of Dan. Tribe of Dan. And I'm sure that the stories of his mighty prowess, muscular, I'm sure that they passed down through history. And names changed and so forth, and exploits may have even changed. But the basic person is still there, Okay. The serpent. We'll try to identify these Grecian Dani by their symbols. The serpent is held by various Hebrew and Chaldee writers to have been the cognizance of Dan. Quote, Dan shall be a serpent in the way, an adder in the path. As the head of 3 tribes, see, one of the 4 camps in the wilderness, remember there were 4 camps and a head tribe of each 4 camp. Dan was the head tribe of one of the camps. He also had an eagle, okay, one of the 4 cherubic symbols. And hence, the 2 signs are often combined, okay? Well, the sign of Reuben is water, isn't it? Unstable as water, Jacob told him, but he also has a man as his herald, because he was the head tribe of the 3 people on one side of the camp that was designated as the camp of the man. camp of the eagle, the ox, and so forth. Okay? So Dan has not only a serpent, but also the eagle, right? Okay. So they're often combined. Ancient and this is a quote out of the Mazzaroth. Okay, ancient learned Jewish authorities unanimously assert that Dan bore Scorpio under an eagle, serpent under an eagle. Mazzaroth 39. Quote, ancient Hebrew and Chaldee authorities say that Dan bore on his standard a crowned serpent, or basilic held in the claws of an eagle. That's in Mazzaroth 41. So we got a crowned serpent, or just a serpent, or maybe sometimes two serpents around a stick. That sound familiar? As regards the employment of these symbols among the Greeks, I find in Wedgwood's Book of Remembrance, Cecrops. Now that's a Greek name for Chalco, or Chalco, in the Bible, Chalco. Cecrops, the founder and first king of Athens, okay, also said to have come from Egypt, and who founded 12 cities, was said to have been half a man and half a serpent. Okay? It is said in another account that the first king of Athens was a dragon. Not an ox, not a unicorn, not a lion, a dragon, which symbol was borrowed by the Romans from Greece. The serpent was heavy in Greece, okay? Why? Because of Dan. The oracle at Delphi, being consulted by the people of Argos, this is from Herodotus, people of Argos, speaks of the Argives as, quote, a triple-coiled serpent, referring probably to the three cities, Argos, Mycenae, and Tiryns. Triple-coiled serpent. Okay, the celebrated statue of Zeus, sitting enthroned in the temple of Olympia, held a scepter tipped with an eagle. The eagle. At Baalbek, a big temple site, okay, which was the limit of Joshua's conquests, and which, if not occupied by Dan, was not far from the northern portion of the so-called Phoenician temple. So it's up there right near Dan, where he conquered Laish and set up a big territory and made it his own. This temple of Baalbek is right near there. Okay? It is described in university history and in Notes of Clerical Furlough, this is by Dr. Buchanan, quote, the temple appears to have been covered and embellished with eagles. On looking up, when under the portal, the big arch, okay, you're looking up under the portal, you see the bottom of the lintel enriched with a piece of sculpture hardly to be equaled. It is the vast eagle, a vast eagle, carrying in its claws two serpents entwined about a rod. There? Oh, there's a footnote here involved here. He says, the symbol of Marseille in France, the ancient so-called Phoenician Massilia. It was a city founded by the Phoenicians in their trips around the Mediterranean, Marseille, France, okay, is a figure resembling Britannica. But she holds a trident and wears a breastplate on which is an eagle surrounded by serpents. Dan went everywhere, and everywhere he went, he left his name and his serpent and his eagle. Okay, let's see, where are we here? 15. Oh, Alexander. Alexander. Where did Alexander come from? Oh, this is stuff is so much fun. Alexander came from. Is that the place that Luke came from? Wasn't the vision, the dream that Paul had? Paul had a dream, and in the dream, this man said, "Hey, come over and tell us about Jesus. Well, we come and see. Come." Where was that? That was Macedon. Yeah, right? He was from from Macedonia. I'm pretty sure that was Luke, right? So Luke was a Macedonian. Well, the Macedonians were tribe of Dan, weren't they? Macedonia is a Danite settlement initially, right? Where's Alexander from? Macedonia. Alexander was a Danite. Alexander the Great of Macedon represented himself to be the son of Jupiter in the form of a serpent. Ptolemy and Seleucus, Alexander's generals, were also, he's got it split up here, Macedonians, right? And their medals all bear the eagle. But we find that the Macedonians were Argives. See, it all goes back a little bit farther, a little bit farther, a little bit farther to Dan, to Egypt. Okay, were Argives. One of their princes, this is from Herodotus, wished to take part in the Olympic Games. The Olympic Games in which only Greeks could participate. Not Macedonians, not you Macedonians, no, just us Greeks, okay? His right was first disputed, but he successfully proved before the judges that the Macedonians were Argives, old Greeks. I got Greek blood in me just the same as you have. I'm an Argive. So they let him play. Okay? It is here worthy of notice that Alexander the Great showed great respect for the Jews. Another connection. What do you read all this stuff for? You know, God, never heard about this. And on being met before Jerusalem, on his way east, before Jerusalem, by the Jewish high priest in his robes, he declared, Alexander, that he had seen in a dream his counterpart. He said, oh, there's a big high priest type of guy. Oh, hey, I saw a guy just like you in my dream, by whom he was directed to undertake the expedition. That's according to Josephus. The high priest, dressed kind of a guy, comes and tells him, hey, go down there to Jerusalem. There's a guy named Dr. Brugsch, B-R-U-G-S-C-H, writing about the Exodus, 1876. Quote, a city named Pitom, P-I-T-O-M, with the addition of the Egyptian monuments of, quote, in the district of Sukkoth. This is in Egypt, right? Where would the district of Sukkoth be? That's the delta. That's where the Israelites lived. Sukkoth means booth, a temporary structure. The feast of Sukkoth in the fall, with trumpets and atonement, the feast of Sukkoth, they get out of the house, build them a temporary structure of branches and so forth, to remind them, and they live out there for a week, they remind them about their temporary structures in the wilderness for 40 years when God took care of them. High, joyous celebration at that feast. Right? Feast of Sukkoth, Feast of Booths. Sukkoth is the origin of the Scythians. They were called Scythians because they wandered around in wagons, in portable, they were nomads. Sukkoth from Egypt. Okay. Addition of the monument in the district of Sukkoth and in the city of Tanis or Zone. The same place is also called Pi Ramesses. Pi-Tam and Ramesses, however, are the places where the Israelites were forced to build the treasuries and storehouses of their oppressors. Quote, as most of the places of this region can only be derived from the Hebrew, just like Sukkoth, it is clear that these very regions in the land of Goshen must be sought. The name Pi-Tam denotes the city of God. Tam, God. Tam, however, add the inscriptions, is also called Ankh. You know the Ankh? Okay? Ankh, with the surname Great God. The Great God Ankh. Great God Tam, Pi-Tam. Investigation shows that the Ankh denotes, quote, the living one, and is nothing else than the Egyptian translation of the Hebrew Jehovah or Yahweh. Okay? As the symbol, they lived there, they lived there for 400 years. They ruled for 250. Didn't some of their stuff rub off on the Egyptians? Huh? Names of cities and, oh, come on. Okay? This reminds us of the brass serpent. Oh, wait a minute. Yahweh. As a symbol of this God, a serpent was worshipped at Pi-Tam. A serpent. This reminds us of the brass serpent that Moses and its worship. Okay? What's next? Pi-Tam. Danites come from Tanis. Okay? I would rather suggest that the serpent, as the cognizance of Dan, was the symbol of that city, one of whose names was Tanis. Okay? Pi-Tam Tanis, or Zoan, and eventually became corrupted as the emblem or similitude of the god of Dan. But be that as it may, the locality ascribed to this Israelitish serpent worship in Egypt is the locality from which the Grecian Dani are said to have come. Okay? You got all this Danite stuff and serpent things happening in Egypt, and that's exactly where the Argos came from when they did their migration out of there. Over the course of a couple hundred years, remember? Not just one or two migrations. Many. Hey, come on over here. We just found this place over there. Great trade. We took over. Taken in connection with the many common affinities and symbols already described, the crowning proof of the identity of the Danites of Israel with the Dani of Greece lies in the claim of relationship with the Jews preferred by the Lacedaemonians. Remember them with Menelaus? Okay? The brother of and the Argive, okay, the most important branch of the Argive Dani, which claim was duly admitted by the high priest at Jerusalem. Oh, there's a connection between them and the high priest? Wait a second. It's recorded in 1 Maccabees 12 and Josephus in his Antiquities, that about 180 years BC, the king of the Lacedaemonians sent the following letter to the Jews in Jerusalem. 180 BC. Quote, Argos, king of the Lacedaemonians, at Onias, or to Onias, the high priest, sendeth greeting. It is found in the writing that the Lacedaemonians and Jews are brethren, and that they are of the stock of Abraham. Now, therefore, since this has come to our knowledge, ye shall do well to write unto us of your prosperity. Hey guys, we found out we're related. How you doing? Huh? They gave no clue or hint as to what the relationship might be, except, recorded by Josephus only, calling the attention to the seal. Quote, this letter is 4 square, and the seal is an eagle with a dragon in its claws. Lacedaemonians with the eagle and the serpent, right? Claws. The cognizant of Dan, in fact of Dan. Now the Jews stated by Josephus to have replied thus, quote, we joyfully received the epistle, and were well pleased with Demoteles and Argos, although we did not need such a demonstration. Evidently, Demoteles and Argos were the guys who brought the letter. They didn't need that, see, because we were well satisfied about it from the sacred writings. They already knew that. Alexander, the king of Lacedaemonia, writes and says we're brothers, and they write back and say, oh yeah, we knew that. Okay. Did the Jews allude to Ezekiel 17, verse 19, where Dan is presented as in company with Greece trading to Tyre? You can look that up. Okay. It corresponds. Oh, that's a different one. Are you convinced that Dan had some kind of influence in Greece and all up around the whole Aegean Sea? Well, of course they went right to Greece, right from Egypt and from Tyre and Sidon. They went right there to Crete. Crete is, you can practically spit on Crete from Egypt, right? And then establishing settlements and trade and stuff at Crete. That's a good jumping off place for the whole Aegean Sea. See? Here's a little map out of Abraham and Capt. See, down here in Egypt, they come from Egypt into Crete and then make their way into all of these different places, Athens and Troy and so forth. It's perfectly reasonable. No problem at all. Okay? 63, number 3. Herodotus. Okay? Again, this is E. Raymond Capt. Okay? Herodotus' time, the story of the Egyptian origin of the Greeks was so well recorded that he did not go into details in his history. However, he did write, quote, if we Greeks, he's, the father of history, a Greek, okay, if we ascend from Danite, the daughter of Acrisius, we shall find that the ancestors of the Dorian princes were of Egyptian origin. In other words, if we trace back to the Danite and then come forward, we find out that they were of Egyptian origin. We came from Egypt, guys. Such is the Grecian account of their descent. Herodotus says, okay? Page 1, okay. The migrations out of Egypt, led by Danaus and Cadmus, are not the only ones on record. Another important Grecian colony was founded by Cecrops. That's that Chalco guy again. Cecrops is the Greek name. An Egyptian and Israelite who became the first legendary king of Attica. Okay, one more time. One more. A migration by sea circa 1296 BC is indicated when the king of Canaan afflicted Israel while Dan abode in ships and Asher in his seaports. That's at Judges 5 part there, where it says that we were doing all this war stuff and Dan abode in ships. He wasn't part of the war. Another big migration happened at that point. I mean, they were, being conquered. Look, get out of here. We'll go over, where Grandpa. Okay. Apparently, most of the tribe of Dan must have left Palestine prior to the time of Jeroboam II. And that would be before they even split, right? Many ancient Greek writers agree that the Danans, D-A-N-A-A-N, Danan, that the Danans came to Argos from Egypt. Okay? That's Hesiod did that. Most dates given fall around the first half of the 16th century. See that? They came from Egypt in 1650 BC. That wasn't even the earliest. Couldn't be. One early history of Ireland links the Danaan, or Tuatha De Danaan, people of God, Tuatha, the tribe of Danaan, the people of Dan, invaders of Ulster, in Ireland, okay, in Ulster, with the Greek Danois and Spartans. Oh, so we got the tribe of Dan as the Greeks and the Spartans, because they all get up there into Ireland and conquer who was it they conquered? The Dorians. First, the Fomorians, that's who it is. The Fomorians. They conquered the Fomorians, but the Fomorians, who came from Greece, okay, earlier they came from Greece. This is 1200 BC. Okay? They came from Greece, and they conquered the Firbolgs, F-I-R-B-O-L-G-S, who also were the earlier settlers from over in Scythia and Greece. Okay? They're all Israelites. Okay? All Israelites came over there. Wait a second here. Tuatha De Danaan, Spartans, who, as roving bands of sea warriors, controlled the Aegean, Cretan civilization in the first millennium BC. There it is. First millennium BC. Later Irish historians trace part of the tribe of Dan to Ireland as early as the 12th century BC. This would have been after the Exodus, when the Israelites were established in Palestine. Wow, and I only hit the highlights, right? There's the tribe of Dan. They went everywhere, naming everything after themselves, putting their symbols all over the place. Tribe of Dan. So, what are we seeing? Seeing a vast amount of pioneering. naming rivers and all that. Tribe of Dan starting in Egypt, maybe 1800 BC, as early as that. I don't see how it could be later than that. I mean, they were there 50 years. Okay. Tribe of Dan starting in Egypt. See, most historians pick up the Greeks in the later days. You know, you start with Argos and Athens and Troy. And some mention a possible connection to Egypt, okay? But they never research far necessary to find out where they came from before they were in Egypt. Oh, that's where they were Egyptians, you know. Well, the Egyptians, just by all the history books, you look at Egyptians and see if they look like Israelites. Okay, they don't. They don't, okay? They don't look like Caucasians, okay? They have a different look. They have different eye and facial characteristics, okay? Also, the Tuatha De Danann, by people who don't go down the path of history that shows them that the tribe of Dan, say that, well, that was the people of Dana, the goddess of Dana. Okay, wasn't the goddess of Dana, the people of the goddess of Dana. Tuatha De Danann are none other than a group of Danites who first settled in Northern Ireland. And Ulster, even though the Danites settled there, the Danites aren't a ruling tribe of Israel, are they? Those are the tribe of Judah, right? Judah. If Judah is around, groups of Israelites, they rule, okay? If they're not around, then they make up their own king. But if Judah is around, it's going to be Judah ruling. The arms of Ulster have a red hand. A red hand. The arm came out. The red cord went around, which is where we get red tape. Government, I'm the ruler, I'm the red tape. I'll seal it with the wax and the red ribbon. You want to go get your project done, you got to go through a lot of red tape government. Okay? The red hand. That comes from Zara. Zara is the ruling entity of the Ulsterites, which are made up of Danites too. Okay? We named all those rivers. And we're not finished with Dan. You know, there's way more to look at, so we'll probably have at least one more segment on Dan. Thanks a lot for watching. Okay, what does all this do? Huh? What does all this do? What's the message behind the lost tribe? God is real. And the things that he says in the Bible are true, have been true, or will be true if they haven't come to pass yet. So what? You can trust God. And if you trust God, and a decision time comes, and there's a decision to save your butt financially, or do it God's way and tithe, or whatever, God said, this is the way you do it. In any situation that you want to bring up, God said, this is the way you do it. It's in the Bible. You do it my way, you trust me, in the face of negative circumstances, you go my way, I'll put my spirit in your body. And when my spirit is in your body, I don't see all of your imperfections. I see you just like Jesus, and you're saved. Faithing, right? Trusting God, faithing. Faithing. You can't trust God on something. You can't trust. How can you trust a real estate agent to say that there's no termites in the building? You can't. You can't. Most real estate agents will make it a condition that you have a termite evaluation on the properties. You know, some of them. You wouldn't trust the real estate agent to say there's no termites here. Okay? Oh, yeah, no, there's no termites in it. Oh, yeah, okay. Okay? You can't believe him without proof. Okay? Well, how can you believe God enough to trust him and go against the whole world and your survival instincts to do it his way if you don't believe in him? Okay? Okay, and how can you believe in somebody you haven't got any proof? You know? How many Christians do you know that can prove God's existence to you? Well, I know because he lives in my... No, that's no good for me. Okay? Give me evidence that I can produce in court to show that God is real. And then maybe I'll take a chance on God. Okay? And that's what the lost tribes do. That's what just the tribe of Dan does. Right? Because God says Dan's going to be this, and he did. And he is. All right. Thanks again for watching. God bless.